So we've been in this Engage series for 4 weeks. We have talked about engaging God, engaging Scripture, engaging community, and engaging the world. And this week we are talking about engaging judgment. Just wait, because it's different from what you think it is. I've been really seeking God about what he wanted this message to be about, and I felt like this was highlighted to me. He wouldn't let up on it, so I'm going to give you what he's shown me. I'm really excited about it. It's going to be awesome. I am 29 years old. I've been married for 7.5 years to my wife, Mallory, and we started dating when I was a sophomore in high school. And, man, she was so beautiful. Sorry. Wow. And thank you. Oh, and it's live. Oh, no. Still is. Even more now. Am I doing it right? Wow. Saving my bacon there. All right. She's so beautiful. I was drawn to her because she's beautiful, but as we got to know each other better, I was really intrigued by how she lived her life, by the way that she looked at her life. She always wanted to be better. She still does. Always wants to be better, always wants to improve. And as great as she was then, I knew that she would always be progressing. And I loved that. I thought that's so amazing. And I wanted that for my own life. Like I don't want to be the same next year as I was this year. I want to be different. I want to be better. I want things to change. And it drew me in and draws me in to this relationship that we have. It's awesome. Marriage has gotten better and better and better. But I'll tell you why I think it's gotten better. See, we have a 1-year-old, and when you have a 1-year-old, you can't really talk to each other while the 1-year-old is awake. You can give half sentences or partial conversations, and that's about it. Can I get an amen from the parents around here? You're not getting into deep conversation, that is for sure. If you get 3 full sentences in a row in, you're doing great. So we put the boy to bed at about 7:30 every night, which is amazing. Because then we have time to have real conversation. And about a week ago, we put our son to bed, and we went out into the living room, started talking. We have lots of conversations at night, and she said, "Is there anything that I can do for you? Is there anything that you need me to change so that our relationship can be better? So that your life can be easier?" And I was like, oh my gosh, I love this woman so much. These are the conversations that have marked our marriage for 7 years. We are consistently going to one another saying, what can I do better? What do you need me to change so that things are easier for you, so that your dreams can be fulfilled? Now, I have some spouses looking at me very uncomfortable right now. Like, this is not the sermon we showed up for. Shut up there. I'm telling you, if you enter into your relationship this way, if you ask these questions of your spouse, your marriage will improve. It will get better. Things will constantly change and progress in amazing ways. And I know that 7 years in, I'm looking forward to 30 years with her. I'm looking forward to 50 years with her, because it'll always get better as long as we maintain this mentality. Does that make sense to you? If you ask these kind of questions to your spouse, it will change your marriage. But if you ask these kind of questions to God, it will change your life. What would it be like to be a people who goes to God and says, is there anything I can change so that we can be more intimate with each other? Is there anything I can do to make sure that our relationship is in the best place possible? That'll change your world. It'll change your life. Yeah? It's 11. Look, we've been through this. I don't ask for feedback. I demand it. All right? I'm going to ask you questions this morning, and I need at least a groan in response. Okay? Excellent. So I want you to keep that question in your mind. Is there anything I can do better? Is there anything I can change to go deeper with God right now? Asking that question of God is huge. I want you to keep that question as we go forward. So we're looking at engaging judgment this morning. And as God led me through this sermon, as he started showing me what his judgment was really like, it was not what I thought it was going to be about. I don't know if you've had this before, but you've been brought up with an idea that it's not quite true. Have you ever had that moment where you're like, oh, judgment was like that for me? And so he took me to Isaiah, which is an Old Testament book. The Old Testament happened before Jesus' life. And Isaiah was a prophet for God. And a prophet is someone that God used to communicate to his people what he wanted to see happen, or to give them a warning of what was coming. So he would choose a prophet out of the nation, and the prophet would tell the people what God was saying. Does that make sense to you? Don't make me come out there. I will do it. We'll get feedback and all sorts of stuff happening. If you don't understand it, you can say no. That's okay. So Isaiah was one of those prophets. The other thing that God did with the prophets was he started telling them what the Messiah would be like. Because the people of God were promised that their sin would be taken care of by a Messiah who was coming, sent from God. Their sin would be taken care of. Their sin would be taken care of. See, this part of the message is worth the price that you paid to come. Your sin is taken care of because Jesus already came. It's done. It's finished. That's good news. Now live accordingly. So he started using the prophets to give them an idea, the nation of Israel, to give them an idea of what the Messiah would look like. Because when he came, they would want to be able to recognize him. Does that make sense to you? He's going to come a while from now. So I'm going to give you clues as to what his ministry is going to be like. Where's he going to come from? What's his lineage going to be? And I don't know how many of you have read the beginning of Matthew and you're like, oh my gosh, we're talking about so many people right now. Why are we talking about Jesus' lineage? Why are we talking about this? This is why. Because the Jewish people were looking for the Messiah to come from this lineage. It was so important to them. That's why all the names. So as we look at Isaiah, who was a prophet, who showed what Jesus' ministry would be like, we want to look at the things that Jesus was looking at. Because he trained for a long time before he was actually in ministry. And he read the Old Testament beforehand. He read these prophets and he went, this is what my ministry is supposed to be like. It's very interesting to me. It may not be to you, but it's really interesting to me that he had a blueprint of what he was supposed to do and what he was supposed to be like. Isn't that awesome? Yes. All right. So as we look at Isaiah, we're starting in chapter 11, verses 1 through 5. Isaiah says, a shoot will come up from the stump of Jesse. From his roots, a branch will bear fruit. The Spirit of the Lord will rest on him, the Spirit of wisdom, of understanding, the Spirit of counsel and of might, the Spirit of knowledge and fear of the Lord. And he will delight in the fear of the Lord. See, this is why it's so important to know the lineage of Jesus. Because if you don't realize that right now Isaiah is talking about the Messiah, who is Jesus. Now, this is also the reason that when people go, hey, where do I start reading the Bible? I say the Gospels. Because if you start day one with this, you're going to go, what? There's a shoot and Jesse has a stump. What's happening right now in my life? What am I supposed to get from this? I go, read the Gospels. And once you read the Gospels for a while, this makes total sense. Because he's referenced in it, and he talks about it. I don't know if you ever think about, Jesus' Bible was not the New Testament. He didn't have it. Didn't exist yet. Anyway, so when we read this, we see that Jesus will come from Jesse's line. And Jesse was the father of David. And Jesus came from David's line. So he's talking about Jesus. And the prophets wrote about this so that as they see Jesus in his ministry, they could go, this is the guy. We're going to acknowledge and follow him. Are you with me? All right, we'll move on here. He then goes on to talk about Jesus' ministry, and he says, he will not judge by what he sees with his eyes or decide by what he hears with his ears, but with righteousness he will judge the needy. Now, I read this a couple of years ago, and I was like, uh-oh. The needy is in for it. Jesus is about to judge them. It's going to get rough for the needy. Because I had my American Christian view of what judgment was. And see, and when I say the word judgment to you, you go, oh no, I think we have an appointment. Right? It's not a good thing as far as our context goes. But I want you to think about, as we read the rest of these verses, think about the way that Jesus treated the needy. What did judgment look like? With justice, he will give decisions for the poor of the earth. He will strike the earth with the rod of his mouth. With the breath of his lips, he will slay the wicked. Righteousness will be his belt, and faithfulness the sash around his waist. This scripture says that Jesus came to give a judgment. But it's not the judgment that we thought we were going to get. And it's not the judgment that they thought that they were going to get. What I realized as I was studying Isaiah is I was like, I know that Jesus talked about this. Because I've been reading the Gospels like crazy for the last year and a half. Over and over and over and over and over and over again. I just read them constantly. And I go, I know Jesus talked about this. He talked about his judgment. What did he say? In John 5, Jesus says, nothing I do is from my own initiative. For as I hear the judgment passed by my Father, I execute judgment. My judgments will be perfect because I can do nothing on my own except to fulfill the desires of my Father who sent me. For if I were to make claims about myself, you would have reason to doubt. Jesus says, for sure, I am judging right now. But what did that judgment look like? There are 3 types of judgment that I want to talk to you about. One was to the people that we just mentioned. You remember? It's the needy. He judged the needy. So when he talked to the needy, that is the outskirts of society, the ones that had been put away, the ones that had been pushed off, how did he interact with them? Because for sure, he was passing judgment. His judgment was, you are worthy of my time. You are loved. You are important. You're valuable. Yeah? He looked at people that nobody looked at and he said, you're worth my time today. Can I meet with you? Can I eat with you? Can I spend part of my life with you? So the same people that the religious leaders went, write them off. They're nobody and they're nothing. You better believe it wrecked their world that his judgment came the way that it did. You see, Jesus' judgment of us is that we are loved, that we're cherished. That we're worth the price of his blood. That's Jesus' judgment given from the Father. Is that what you thought it was? Man, that's not what I thought it was. Jesus' judgment brings freedom. It brings hope. It brings identity. Jesus took people that were utterly broken and gave them a brand new life. The reason that he's even talking about this in John 5, is that there was a man sitting by a pool waiting to be healed. He couldn't be healed because he couldn't get into the pool in time. They believed that when the water was stirred, if you got into the pool, you would be healed. Well, he couldn't get to the water because he couldn't walk. And Jesus asks him if he really wants to be well. He says, yes, I do, but I can't get in the pool. And Jesus says, get up, take your mat and walk. It's a man that no one's seeing. No one believes is worthy. In fact, in their culture, if you were crippled like that, they believed that it was because of your sin or because of your parents' sin or because of their parents' sin that you were the way that you were. And so they felt very comfortable shunning those people away from their community, not allowing them to enter into that community in the same way. Jesus took the time to set this man free and to give him a brand new life. That is what judgment should do. That is what God's judgment does. New identity, new life. New freedom. Don't you want some of that? The other thing that God's judgment did was it cut short the religious leaders in what they thought was right, because they thought that they were doing the right thing. And time again, as you read the Gospels, you'll see that they came up to Jesus after this and went, dude, it's the wrong day for healing. Did you not check your calendar this morning when your alarm went off? Didn't check it? This is Saturday, it's a Sabbath. They thought they were right. And so often we do. Do you know what's a burden? It's a burden to be the most right person. Because if you are the most right person, then everyone else is just so stupid. Right? Man, it's a burden to be the most right person. It's hard to tolerate other people when you're the most right person. And I have been this guy. Where you go, why can't they understand? Why can't they get it? What's wrong with them? Have you been there? It is a burden to be the most right. It is easy to enter into righteousness. Easy. It's so much easier. And in order to enter into righteousness, we need to give up being the most right. Because I'll tell you something, you can't be the most right and love the people you're around at the same time. You just can't do it. If it is so important to you that people know how right you are and how wrong they are, how are you going to make time to love them? And how will they hear you by the time you do? We shut doors before the word go. By putting our rightness on them. And making human judgment. And calling it God's judgment. It's a bad deal. No wonder the world goes, God's judgment, get that away from me. No, that's not God's judgment. That's ours. Are you with me? What if we were a people that looked at others with the same eyes that God has looked at us? Because the truth is, you and I did not earn what we got from God. We did not earn the grace and mercy that we were given. Did you? I didn't. And if we can stop looking at people as what they do and start looking at them as who they were created by, their inherent value, their inherent worth, then we may actually have influence in their life. We walk around going, why is no one paying attention to my right words? Because you can only have influence over what you love. Unless you want a strong arm. In which case, you can have influence, but you won't love them the way that you should. That's dictatorship on a micro level. Is that really what you want? Come on. Is that really what you want? So I will challenge you. Take a week, and every time you look at somebody and you pass human judgment on them, I want you to take a step back, and I want you to put God's judgment on them instead, because they are worthy, they are loved, they are cherished, they are desired by the Father. And so they should be desired by us. 100%. I've been doing this for a week. It is the most uncomfortable thing ever. I had no idea how many times I see somebody in a parking lot and I assume I know their whole life. And I don't. It's not comfortable, but it's worth it. There's one more thing I want to give you out of this. And that's the way that Jesus' judgment helped to shape and mold his disciples. Because time and time again, they would come to him and they would ask, what he thought about this thing or that thing. So on one day, they had this amazing ministry time. Jesus had sent them out with his authority. They're casting out demons. They're setting people free. They're healing the sick. And they come back to Jesus pumped. It's working. We're doing it. We're amazing. And I want you to see that Jesus didn't go, "You're not amazing, I'm amazing." He didn't do that. Because they start talking about who's the greatest. Now, this part didn't happen, but I'm imagining this, all right? Peter's going, I cast out this kind of demon. And John's going, I healed this kind of person. And James is saying, I loved this kind of person. And we do that, right? As we do ministry, we go, well, what's better? Is this better? Is ministry to the poor better? Or is ministry to the prisoners better? Jesus, which is better? Which one of us is the greatest? And Jesus grabs a child and says, if you want to be the greatest, which you should be like this child. He just changes their perspective. And if we ask for it, if we ask for God's judgment in our life, once we know our inherent value, which is key, it's the first step. You can't go forward into the world and love them without being loved. You can try, but man, you'll have to act your butt off. I've done it. It's hard work. But if we get our value, if we understand our identity as loved first, then we can go to God and say, what can I change? What needs tweaked in my life so that I can follow you with my whole heart? So that there's no barriers between us. And that also is God's judgment. It's God's perspective. Do you understand? That's wisdom. The wise seek correction. It's the foolish that avoid it. We want to be a wise people. One day in Jesus' ministry, the religious officials throw a woman at his feet and say she has been caught in the act of adultery. Our law says to stone her. What do you say? They're trying to trap him. And they're using her whole life for that. Can you undervalue someone more than that? And Jesus says, I'll tell you what, if you haven't sinned, you can throw stones at her. Whoever hasn't, go ahead, start your sentencing. And one by one, all the people drop their rocks and walk away. Jesus looks at the woman and says, where are those who have come to condemn you? And she says, they're gone, Lord. And he replies to her, then neither do I condemn you. Go away and sin no more. Now, if you read this with our previous idea of what judgment is, it sounds like go away and sin no more. You terrible, horrible person. As though you'll ever be able to do it. You're so broken. But if we read it with this new version of what judgment is, then we can see the hope in what he says, the promise in what he says, as he looks at her with compassion and love and says, go away and sin no more. You don't ever have to feel this way again. You don't ever have to live this way again. From this day forward, you are free from the things that you have done. It's a new perspective. It's a new life. It's new hope found in Jesus. This is God's judgment. You want some of that? Your brokenness does not define you. God has already defined you as worthy, as loved.